Every .NET developer has to learn C#.NET. So question is why? What is the role of C#.NET? Why every .NET developer has to learn the C#.NET? Come on.
To define the functionality of the application.
Define the functionality of the application, right? So now this is the time where we have to understand whenever you are developing an application, whenever we are developing an application, we need one technology and one language. Now we people have to understand what is the role of language, what is the role of technology. On that day also I said I will give you the clarity about that. So here, right, I want to develop a web application. I want to develop a web application. So Kalyani, you tell me, if I want to develop a web application by using .NET platform, what I need?
Is .NET technology and
We
C
need
Sharp
a
.NET.
web technology called ASP.NET and we need a language called C#.NET. C#.NET. Next, I want to develop a Windows. I want to develop a Windows application. Right now, I want to develop a Windows application. What is the technology?
Windows Forms.
We need a technology called Windows Forms. We need a technology called Windows Forms and we need a language called C#.NET. Right? So I want to develop a web service. I want to develop a web service. Okay. So whenever I want to develop a web service, I need a technology called WCF and a language called C#.NET. Finally, we observed one thing. To develop any type of application, we need one technology and one language. So everywhere you need a language called C#.NET. Let's try to understand what is the role of C#.NET, why C#.NET. So for example, let's take the example of a web application. In this web application, let us assume you are developing a web page. Let's implement a web page called a login page. We want to develop a login page. When you are developing a login page means login page is a part of what application? Web application. As part of web application development, I am developing a login page. I am developing a login page. Whenever login page I am developing. In this login page, what you need exactly? You need a text box, another text box. First text box is accepting UID. Second text box is accepting password. Here you have a button. What is this button, guys?
Sign in button.
Login button. Login button. So actually, what is the functionality of login page? First of all, end user will enter what? End user will enter what in login page? End user has to enter username. Suppose he is entered username as Ravi. Ravi. He has to enter password. Let's say he has entered password as ABC. Then end user will click a button called login. Whenever end user will click login button, what is the functionality of this login page? What is the functionality of this login page? What it will do?
Will verify the user ID.
That accepted user ID and password, it will communicate with the database. Means you will have a database. In this database, let us assume this is a database. In this database, you will have a table called user list. You have a table called users list. Users list table. Table is, let's say, users list table. Users list table. That user list table will contain two columns. Number one is UID. Second one is password. And UID column, user ID, the pen board is not working properly. That's why I'm unable to write very clearly. Try to understand. First column is UID, second one is password. UID column will contain all usernames. Let us assume one username is Ravi and password is ABC. Like that, it will contain thousands of users list. Whenever you click login button, what will happen? That application will communicate the database and will check the user ID and password is matching or not matching. If it is matching, it will redirect you to the next page. If it is not matching, here, here in this page only it will display the error message. Here it will display the error message. So that means your login page functionality. Login page functionality is whenever end user will click login button, it will communicate the users list table. It will communicate the users list table and will verify the user ID and password. And if both are matching, redirecting you to the next page. If both are not matching, display the error message. So this is the functionality. This this is the functionality of the login page. To define this functionality of the login page, we need to write programming. We need to write program. We need to write program. Somewhere I am getting disturbance. We need to write program. To write this program, we need a programming language. That programming language is nothing but C#.NET. That programming language is nothing but in .NET C#. Finally, we can say the role of C#.NET is to define the functionality of the application. To define the functionality of the application by using C#.NET, we are going to write a program. To write that program, we need a programming language. Due to that reason, in .NET platform, they are giving a programming language called C#.NET. Whatever application you are going to develop, in that application, the role of the C#.NET in .NET is to define the functionality of the application. We have to write a programming. And sir, what is the role of technology called ASP.NET? Then this application environment called login page controls all these things is providing by the technology. Finally, we can say technology is providing the application environment and the language is for the to define the functionality of the application. So with this we can say to define the functionality of the application you need a programming language called C#.NET. Finally, we can say why C#.NET. The answer is for C#.NET. The answer is to define the functionality of the application. Define the functionality of the application. So we can give more clarity about this when we are developing any type of application. When we are developing any type of application, to define the functionality of the application, we need a programming language called C#.NET. We need a programming language called C#.NET. So that is the role of C#.NET. By this we discussed 2 points. What is C#.NET? By C#.NET. So what we discussed, what is C#.NET? C#.NET is a programming language. Second question is why C#.NET? To define the functionality of the application. Right. Next, features of C#.NET. Features of C#.NET. Right. Let's try to understand the features of C#.NET. Right. Number one, every statement should end with semicolon. Every statement should end with semicolon. For example, statement 1 semicolon, statement 2 semicolon, like that. Whatever statements you are writing, every statement should end with the semicolon. That is the first point, first feature. Second feature, you can say, yes, it will support block level programming. It will support block level programming. So example for block Example for block, opening brace to closing brace means statement 1, statement 2, statement 3, statement 1, statement 2, statement 3. So it is a block, opening brace to closing brace. To represent multiple statements, we are using a concept here called block. That's why when you are writing programming by using C#.NET, you can use blocks. That's why it is called block level programming. Block level programming. Next, block level programming. Next, yeah. The next right feature is it is a it is a case sensitive language. Case sensitive language. It is a case sensitive language. Case sensitive language means, for example, case sensitive language means, for example, you are declaring a variable int a is nothing but variable declaration. In this, you are doing variable declaration. So, what is variable? Very simple. Variable is a field which can contain some value. Variable is a field which can contain some value. Here, name of the variable is a, and the data type is integer. Data type is integer. So, next to a equal to 10. Here what I have done. So initializing value into a particular variable. Initializing value into a particular variable means here your code intention is here creating one variable called a, creating a variable called a. Uma, please mute yourself. Right here, initializing the value called in this statement, initializing the value called 10 into your variable. Initializing the value called 10 into your variable. Are you clear? So this is the code actually. But at the time here, what is happening? Here in the second statement, you are getting error because at the time of first statement you are telling you're creating a variable called small a, and at the time of initializing you're trying to store into that 10 into a capital A. So immediately compiler will generate an error. It can't recognize capital A because you declared it as small a because it is a case sensitive language. Now next third point is C#.NET is a most important point. Is a object oriented object-oriented programming object-oriented programming language. It is a object-oriented programming language. Object-oriented programming language. So what do you mean by object-oriented programming languages? We need to discuss more and more clear now here. Programming languages are two types. Two approaches are we have. One is called procedural oriented approach. Second one is programming approaches are two types. One is procedural oriented approach. Second one is object oriented approach. In procedural oriented approach, in procedural oriented approach, program is a in procedural oriented approach, your programmer solution is a collection of methods in this approach. For example, if whenever you are writing a program by using procedural oriented approach, your program, let's say it is a program which you are writing by using procedural oriented approach. Then the program is a collection of methods. Method is nothing but a behavior which will contain some logic to define the behavior. Let us assume here you have written some logic, first method, and you have written another method called m2. You have written another method called m2, and here you have written some other logic, and here you will have a special method called main. Main is nothing but program execution starts by main, program execution controlling by main, and program execution stop by main. You can observe total. This is your program block. In that you have first method and second method, and it is called a special method. Why it is called a special method? Because sorry, your when you run this program, first the program execution starts by main, like main door for your house, like that. Entry, exit, control from this method. So starts from main. That's why whenever you want to invoke any method, you have to invoke from the main. Here I am calling M1, here I am calling M2. Then how this program will execute exactly? Whenever you run the program, first control will execute main, and it will come to main method. It will start from opening brace, then it will invoke M1. Here control will go to M1 and will execute M1 and will come back. Then after this control will execute M2. Here control will go to M2 and will execute and it will come back. Once it is encountered the closing brace of the main method, then it will understand the program execution is completed. So whenever you have written a program by using this approach, that programming language is called as procedural oriented approach. That is following procedural oriented approach. That programming language is called procedural oriented programming languages. Have you seen anywhere this programming language, this approach in any language, guys?
C
Yes.
program.
C is following this approach. Due to that reason, you can say C language is a procedural oriented programming language. Into the industry, first this approach came due to the some limitations, and second approach came. That second approach is nothing but object oriented approach. In this approach, your program is a collection of classes. Your program is a collection of classes. Class is a collection of methods. Whenever you are writing a program in this approach, in this object-oriented approach, you have to represent your methods in the class. To define a class, we'll use a keyword called class. C1 is a class name. There you have to represent your methods. Let us assume same M1, same M2. If you want to define, no doubt, you should define within the some class. Here I am writing all these two methods within a class called C1. Here you can observe one important point. This is your program block. C1 is the name of the class. Class is a keyword. Class is a collection of methods. The methods, whatever you want to define, you should be defined within the some class. So here M1 and M2 are the methods which are member methods of C1 class. Finally, you can say C1 is a collection of two methods. And here you are defining another class called C2. But in this programming approach also, you will have a special method called main. Let us assume here main is part of C2. Main is part of C2 class, and in this approach also program execution starts by, because here also main is a special function. Here also main is a special function because program execution starts by main and controlling by main, and program execution stop by main. Finally, guys, in this approach, when you written program, your program is a collection of classes. Right now we have how many classes in this program? How many classes?
Two classes.
Two classes. First class is C1. C1 class contain how many methods? Two methods.
Two method.
M1 and M2. And C2 class contain a method called main. The role of main is your program execution starts by a main method, controlling by main method, stop by main method. Whenever you want to call a method, you have to call with the help of class name. For example, C1 dot M1 semicolon, you are calling M1. Second, C1 dot M2, you are calling M2 function. So class name dot method name in this approach. Now when you run this program, in this program, your execution engine will start the program execution from main. Second, it will call C1.M1. Your control will go to C1 class and will execute M1 and will come back. Then C1.M2, again it will go to C1 class, will execute M2, will come back. Once it is encountered the closing brace of the main method, then it will understand program execution is completed. So that is a story about object-oriented programming approach. A programming language which will follow this approach, the programming language is called object-oriented programming language. So where you have seen this approach in which languages according to your academics? Huh? C,
Java,
C++,
C sharp, Java.
C++, Java, C++, Java, Java, and all .NET languages called C#.NET, VB.NET, VB.NET, and so on and so on. All these languages are all these languages are following this object-oriented approach. Due to that reason, all these languages are called as object-oriented programming language. Due to that reason, we have given a statement here that is C#.NET is a object-oriented programming language. Now onwards, whenever you have seen any C#.NET program, you should not surprise. You should see this approach. It means you should not surprise by seeing the classes. No doubt about that. Every program will contain collection of classes. Due to that reason, after we have done 1 week classes, we will go to a concept called object-oriented programming concepts. We will go in depth of oops there. There you will understand what is class, why importance of class, all these things. That is the last feature of the important feature. Last means I'm just sharing important features of C#.NET. You can say this is the first feature. You can say, and you can say this is the second feature. To learn any programming language, minimum basic features we should understand. And you can say this is the third feature, and you can say this is the fourth feature. Just only four features I was exposed, not more than that.